Hey guys, Saf here with another Raid Shadow Legends video. I hope you are doing well today. Now, a question that I get asked a lot whenever I'm streaming, whenever I'm talking to my clanmates is, what blessing should I pick for X champion? It is quite a difficult question to answer because there are lots of factors that go into that question. And the one area of the game which actually is a little bit more complicated than any other is Hydra Clan Boss. We all know that Hydra Clan Boss has so many things going on at any point in time that it is not just simply carbon copy from other areas of the game. You need to specialize, you need to be very specific and think thoroughly in terms of how you are using all of your different champions and all of the different effects. So what I want to do in this video is kind of give you a tier list slash breakdown priority list, however way you want to form it, of the blessings and the way you should pick them for the team that you are putting together. Now, obviously, the team is more important than the blessing, but the blessing will then be important for the team. You need to make sure you've got the right champions with the right roles first. You need a provoker for the decay head if it is up in rotation. You need some sort of solution for the torment head, or you need to go in knowing you're going to have to ride out all those fears. You need some sort of protection. You probably need some sort of mischief tank. These are the sort of common things you need in your team. Turn meter boosting is an option as well. There are lots of teams out there, and if you do want to cheat and you've got an Acrizia, then everything is much easier. But let's take a look at the blessings we have available to us. And before we begin in looking at actually what you should prioritize and where, we're going to instantly exclude a number of blessings that are not important and you should never ever consider using. But what we need to come in and instantly remove is some of the blessings that are not relevant. Obviously, we're going to ignore Incinerate and we're going to ignore Lethal Dose. They only work in Arena. That is not relevant. We're also going to ignore Ward of the Fallen because it is very much designed as a Arena go second when all of my team has died mechanic. That's not something that's ever going to be a scenario in Hydra in any sort of fashion. The other thing we're going to ignore is Polymorph. The Hydra heads cannot be polymorphed, therefore this blessing here is totally useless in this sort of PvE setting, so we're going to ignore that one. And we're also going to ignore a bunch of different control effect blessings. We're going to ignore Indomitable Spirit here because sure, you can block the fear, but it is not really like, it's one turn cooldown, but it's only a 20% chance even at 6-star. It's not something you can reliably depend on. We're going to ignore Dark Resolve. Again, we're only talking it's 20% chance. It's not worth considering, to be honest, even over just more damage. We're also going to ignore Carapace. I can never say the name of this one. The champion will receive less damage when they're under these debuffs. It's actually quite strong if you're under a true fear. However, if you're really under a true fear all the time, it's a bit of a problem. You probably need to find a better solution. And it's not worth really considering as a damage reduction, because although you're getting 30% damage reduction, it's nice. If you've got those fears out all the time, it's a problem. The last one we're going to exclude is also Life Harvest. The heads are never revived, they respawn. It's a different mechanic, so there's no reviving going on here. This blessing doesn't work in this area. We've also got Chainbreaker as well. If you do want the raw stats, Chainbreaker is an option, but ultimately, you know, these chances of it happening, like 10% chance to get an extra 25%, it's just such a low chance, it's not worth considering over another blessing. So if you head over to hellhades.com now, we do have an article which is very useful to you. It's a blessings guide, choosing the blessings for your team. On many of the champion guides, we will recommend a blessing, but some of those blessings are classified as team blessings. And what that basically means is you only really want one of them in your team. We can summarize these as basically 4 or 3, which is Cruelty, Brimstone, and the Aura blessings. And at the moment, Temporal Chains is probably better to only have one because I believe it is still bugged at full 6-star awakening. I don't have many 6-star awakenings. In fact, I think I have none for legendary, so I can't reproduce that, but definitely on the test server, I think it was bugged. So these are kind of blessings you only really need one in your team. The reason why they either don't stack or the application of them is limited to just one, or it kind of negates the other one. So you only need one in the team to make it effective, and any other champion with it in the team is not gaining any effect. And what we've done in this guide here, we've kind of given you recommendations of how you put together blessings for your team in sort of the core areas. We're talking Clan Boss. We're talking Hydra Clan Boss, which is what we're going to be talking about here in this video. We're talking in dungeon teams, what kind of blessings are really high value, what ones should you get and what ones shouldn't you. Arena go first for speed teams, and sort of defensive options for Arena go second. So these are kind of designed to give you some recommendations of how you put different blessings together with other champions, which is a context that is very difficult to show in just a specific champion guide where we go, this is a good blessing for this champion. So that's a good article. That is in the menu. If you head up into the menu here, you can find it in the guides and tier list menu. Check it out. Let us know what you think with the comments there. But back to the video now, we're going to build the list of priorities in terms of blessings in which you should pick. So let's go through some of the niche or ignorable options first. First up, we've got Miracle Heal. Now, this would be the blessing that most people go, oh, that's designed 100% for Hydra. Well, the problem is it's not really that strong. Firstly, you have to be 6 out of 6, so fully awakened for you to even get 100% chance to decrease the max HP that you've lost. So basically restoring max HP, and then you're only restoring 15%. The problem is the Head of Decay already takes 15%. So you end up in this kind of pseudo-neutral state where the Head of Decay takes 15%, you put it back. And you're in like, you're not really losing, you're not really gaining. Pair that with the fact that it only works on direct heals, so leech and continuous heals will not be impacted by this. And the healer must also wear this blessing. So it means if you have any other form of healing, and it's not done by the wearer of this blessing, then you're always going to be chasing your own tail because you can never actually recover. The only window you're going to be able to recover your max HP is when the Head of Decay is decapitated and you have a limited amount of time in terms of getting more turns on your healer to be able to pull this back up. Someone like a Doom Priest, it seems like a good idea. I've got a fully 6-star awakened Doom Priest and I find that this blessing is kind of a waste of time. So I would definitely recommend you never use Miracle Heal. It's a bit like Iron Will as well. Iron Will works a little bit better on Miracle Heal. However, the problem with Iron Will is it's only going to affect the Head of Wrath when he activates on his counter. So you've got like 10% of your overall damage you're going to take from all the heads and all their abilities, in which you're going to be able to reduce it by 30%. Now that could potentially be game changing if you're getting one shot by the Head of Wrath. But if you're getting one shot by the Head of Wrath, you're probably struggling with your team. You know, it means you haven't got block buffs out there. It means you haven't got decreased attack out there. It means you're not removing the increased attack off him. There's different effects that could be done to actually mitigate it better than Iron Will. And for an epic tier, unless everyone is going to be Iron Will, which is pretty impractical and poor decision making, the value goes down. So I would say this is on the Miracle Heal tier, although it does work a bit better than Miracle Heal. Now, Heaven Cast is great for a champion like Seeker. So if you've got a champion where the only debuff you care about is on the A1, the basic ability, which is the default skill, then Heaven Cast is actually quite powerful because you're going to reduce the amount of accuracy you need by quite a significant amount, 40% at 6-star awakening. Someone like Seeker, you don't really want to index any accuracy into because outside of his A1, where he's got a 50% chance to provoke, which is very good for Hydra, he doesn't do any debuffs. So accuracy is sort of a stat you're indexing into out of necessity rather than because you want to do it, because you're not going to gain any more than other than that A1. Well, with Heaven Cast active, his A1 becomes much easier to manage. You can reduce the accuracy much lower, and that would allow you to potentially index more into attack or defensive stats to keep him alive longer. So if you've got someone like a Husk, a Seeker, these are champions that are perfect for this role where the A1 is very important for the debuff. The rest of the debuffs you don't care about. Heaven Cast then would move into like above an F tier into sort of like a C tier for me, a niche scenario where it's actually quite valuable. In terms of the legendary blessings here, you don't really need the legendary aura because you're not dealing with an enemy aura. The only difference between the epic and the legendary aura is the legendary will reduce the enemy's aura. So if you're in a situation where you've got a epic and a legendary on a similar awakening level, put the epic with the epic aura and leave the legendary for better legendary blessings. For Lightning Cage, this blessing is designed really for arena. If you're using this to almost protect the Head of Mischief from stealing your buffs, you're kind of doing it wrong. You want to have a Mischief tank with high resistance, or you want to have an ability to block the buffs so you don't really care if he steals them, he can't spread them. That's the important thing to do with the Mischief. If you're going to use this, it's still not guaranteed at 75% chance, and it doesn't really do anything other than that. You know, the damage is nice, it's 2.5% of the enemy boss's max HP. It's okay. It's not crazy damage though. I would probably put this in the Heaven Cast here as well in C, where I wouldn't really use it unless I had literally no other option and I didn't really think anything else was worth it. Let's go through the Dark Blessings now. We're going to talk about Phantom Touch, we're going to talk about Crushing Rent and Hero's Soul, those 3 blessings at the end of this video when we're going to do a bit of a math breakdown. But in terms of the Cruelty Blessing, this is the one blessing that I would say is 100% essential for any Hydra team. Ideally, you want to place this on an AoE A1 champion. Someone like a Necromothar, Cruelty is probably better than the legendary blessings because every time the head is decapitated, all the head respawns, the Cruelty stack resets. Essentially, the variant changes, it resets it, change it back, resets it again. So you're going to have to continuously keep applying this. So you're going to need someone who can AoE A1 regularly. Someone like a Geomancer is also a good choice. But it will reduce the boss's defense by 20% at 6 out of 6. That is nothing to be ignored. That is pretty strong against targets, especially the Suffering Head, which has like 13,000 defense. That 20% will be felt. It's very powerful. Prioritize it on an AoE A1 champion, even if you have to drop a legendary blessing. Now, in terms of temporal chains here, it's okay. If the enemy gets Poison Cloud, great, you're going to reduce their speed by 5%. If the enemy gets ally protection from the Suffering Head, great, you're going to be reducing their speed by 5%. If you're hitting this 15% turn meter drop because they triple buffed, something is going wrong. Now, it could happen the Mischief Head 3% your Mischief tank. That's a possibility. Great, you're going to reduce the Mischief Head's turn meter by 15%. It could be quite clutch. I think, though, that there are better blessings and more options available to you, that this would not be really worth getting. It would be better to bring more damage or more utility rather than trying to slow the heads down because they've got a buff. If they get a buff, generally your team is not kind of doing what they're meant to do. Then we get the War Blessings. Now, Faultless Defense is almost worthless here. Off the top of my head, none of the abilities multi-hit. They're all singular hit. There are some abilities that will attack a single target and then hit randomly. This only works from multi-hit abilities. Affinity Clan Boss, the Demon Lord, this is really, really powerful because he hits 4 times. So every single hit is going to be reduced by up to 35%. But in Hydra, don't do Faultless Defense. It's pointless. We've talked about the Commanding Presence aura here. It's much better to have if you've got like a speed or a defense aura. 35% is actually quite impactful if you can get to a high awakening, not so much the lower one. Now, the problem with Soul Reap on Hydra, it's meant to ignore all damage reduction skills, effects, and buffs. But for bosses, it doesn't do that. And the Hydra boss heads all have an innate sort of either 10 or 30% AoE damage reduction, depending on whether it's the Suffering Head or normal heads. And for Soul Reap to be able to activate on AoE, so if you hit multiple targets and they all pass into the threshold, it meant that the Soul Reaper was coded as an AoE effect. So what this means is when you're fighting in Hydra with Soul Reap, all of the heads get a lot of damage reduction. A lot of the final damage you do is reduced by upwards of 40% if you've got the Suffering Head out there, because it's 30 plus 10 plus 10 plus 10, all multiplicative. It means he doesn't do what it's meant to do, which is execute a target. It can be useful if one of your champion has been eaten by a Hydra. However, my testing has found that it doesn't do any more damage than just a standard War Master champion, which has an AoE ability. My Necmothar often out damages my 5-star Cantra who has Soul Reap. So I think, to be honest, Soul Reap is one of those options where it's on the Heavencast tier, C tier. It's not very powerful. It can help in niche situations. If you have the spare legendary blessing, then it's possible for you to use it. But it's not going to have the same impact that it has on other bosses in other areas of the game where they don't have any sort of innate PvE damage reduction. And finally, we come to the Chaos Blessings. Survival Instinct here is actually okay. However, if you're receiving debuffs in any sort of capacity, that's also another bit of a red sign or a bit of a flag of an issue with your team. Now, the key thing to note here is it doesn't have a cooldown, but you can only get this proccing once per enemy turn, which means that at any point in time, you're only ever going to get 10% in one go. It's something useful to have, but I think the rare blessings are better options than Survival Instinct. It's again on that C tier. If you don't really want more damage, then potentially it could help you get back around to your skills. We're going to talk about Crushing Rend at the end of this video when I do some math breakdown, but the key thing to note here is it can't work unless you're really at 6 out of 6, because it'll only apply to the first hit or the first and second hit at 5-star. So unless you're at 6 out of 6, Crushing Rend is almost forgettable. It's just as bad as Miracle Heal. It won't work. Now we get to probably the one that's going to surprise most people. Brimstone, in my opinion, is actually quite poor for Hydra. The problem with Brimstone is it only activates when an active skill is used by the enemy. And most of the time with Hydra, active skills are not actually happening. If we're talking the Head of Decay, which you're going to permanently provoke, he only ever uses his basic skill. So therefore, if you place it on the Head of Decay, it doesn't work. If you place it on, say, the Head of Torment or the Head of Wrath, they only have one active ability, and they're on either a 3 or a 5 turn cooldown, something in that range. So you really have not that many windows in which you can get that to activate. You also have things like the Head of Blight. He doesn't like using his A2, when there are no poisons and block debuffs are out. He will only do his A3, which is a 5-turn cooldown. So you quickly realize we're running out of heads here that can activate Smite debuff. The Mischief head will only ever use his active ability if he steals a buff. And if he's stealing a buff, you've probably got a bigger problem than trying to get Brimstone to activate. So we're really left with Suffering as the best head. It has 2 active abilities, it has extra turns, so you can get a lot more uptime on your Brimstone, because obviously the more turns the enemy takes, the quicker the debuff falls out and the quicker you can get it back out. So I would suggest if you're going to bring Brimstone into Hydra, you bring it on a single target champion so that you can make sure you always place it on the Suffering head, and it is less valuable when Suffering is not in rotation, because all the other heads you'll find that you'll barely use it. Decapitated heads also cannot activate Brimstone. So there's very few niche scenarios in which Brimstone is actually powerful in Hydra. It also is capped at 100,000 plus 25% splash. So it's basically the same as having a Husk A2 or a Royal Guard A2, which you can get without having all of these different conditions. So I would put Brimstone as kind of like if I can put it on a single target champion that I know I can get it on the Suffering head, then it's worth, otherwise it's not. So let's talk about the 3 damaging blessings you have a choice between. That is going to be Crushing Rend, Phantom Touch, or Hero's Soul. A brief breakdown of how these work. Phantom Touch is obviously based off your attack value. Crushing Rend is based on the enemy's level. And then Hero's Soul is a straight multiplication. Now with Hero's Soul in Hydra, it's going to be 4 enemy heads, because of the way that it is coded. All you have to do is hit a boss. Any other enemy on the team counts. It's a bit of a niche thing. It suggests only bosses are minions, but actually if we ever get a boss where there are enemy champions out there, then it will actually work as well. Somewhere like Dark Fae, if you hit the Dark Fae and you have Hero Soul, technically you're going to get 60%. Even though those clones are probably not coded as minions, it's the way that it is coded. So you should get, with Hero Soul on Hydra, 12% at full awakening. With Phantom Touch, you're going to get, I think, it doesn't really matter how hard it hits, it's how frequent. So at 1 star, it's 20%. At 6 star, it's like 100% with a 35% chance to proc twice. But Crushing Rend, obviously, as I've mentioned, only works all the time if you're at 6 out of 6. So I have put on here a bit of a math assessment, and we're going to be looking at the 1, 3, 5, and 6 star awakening tiers. Obviously, at 2 and 4, you just get stats. You don't get any effects. And I've picked out a Nightmare head. Their defense ranges between sort of 3,500 to 6,000, with the Suffering really high. So I've just put a 4,000 defense marker here. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to place decreased defense. Instantly, that's going to bring us down to 56. And I'm going to place a fully stacked Cruelty on that target. So I'm going to assume I've got a 6-star Cruelty out there, and that's going to reduce the defense by another 20%. That happens before we do this calculation. Now, Crushing Rend here is based on a fully stacked Crushing Rend. This is if there was a 6-star Crushing Rend. You can see it drops the defense down a little bit further, the damage reduction. So we're gaining about 11% there. But remember, Phantom Touch also ignores 30% defense. So when we're looking at the comparison between how much Crushing Rend does versus how much Phantom Touch will do, they're on the same rough end of the damage reduction scale because he's ignoring 30% defense. So we're gaining roughly the same DR percentage there. So there's no difference between a 6-star Crushing Rend in terms of the defense number versus a Phantom Touch proc. So let's just assume we're going to get a 250,000 attack out for just a random number that we've picked out of a hat. With Phantom Touch, obviously it's based on your attack value, so I'm going to say that my champion has got 6,600 attack, which is quite high probably for Hydra, but hey, we're going to use that number. Now we can put basically against a 1, 3, 5, and 6-star awakening tier here to basically look at how much extra damage is my blessing contributing to this initial raw damage. So for Crushing Rend, at 1 star, it is 50 levels. So every 50 level, we ignore 1%. So we're going to reduce that down by a little bit. And you can see that the 1-star Crushing Rend, the first hit, we're going to gain around about 5,000 on our 250,000. It's pretty poor. Phantom Touch, however, doesn't really have an issue. The only thing we're going to have a question with is, will we actually proc the Phantom Touch? At 1 star, it's 20%, but if we proc it, we're going to get an extra 30,000 damage based on our 6.6k Phantom hit attack. That is assuming, of course, we've got increased attack buff on optimally. Now, if we're talking about Hero Soul, that is just a straight 2% increase on 1 star because we get 0.5% times 4. So we're actually going to gain 5,000 extra damage. Now, if this scales up on here, we can see at sort of a 6 to 5 star awakening, there's a big jump in terms of the damage profile. Now, Phantom Touch is obviously quite linear throughout. At 5-star, we get a 100% chance for that 30,000. At 6-star, we got a chance of a second 30,000. So that would be about 60,000 on that 35% chance. Phantom Touch is, on a singular target, the best damage output option. Now, keep in mind, you need attack. You also only get it on a single target, whereas Crushing Rend and Hero Soul would work on any attack, on any AoE, on any damage profile. So that is something to consider. With Crushing Rend, we're only gaining about 27,412 on that damaging hit. But we can see that Hero Soul actually is increasing by 30,000. So on this assessment here in Nightmare, if you're thinking of a enemy max HP champion, you might find that Hero Soul is actually better damage output than Crushing Rend throughout all 1-star to 6-star Awakening. The good thing about Hero Soul is it works on every tier, whereas obviously Crushing Rend, you need the 6 out of 6. But even at 6 out of 6, we're seeing that Hero Soul is potentially more powerful than Crushing Rend. Now, Phantom Touch is great if you're a single target nuker. Phantom Touch can only work on a single target. In terms of the sort of tier list here on Nightmare specifically, I would say potentially for an AoE champion Hero Soul, for a single target Phantom Touch or Hero Soul, depending on what you want to do. If you're defense based or HP based, 100% Hero Soul over Phantom Touch. And then Crushing Rend is kind of really, I would say, not worth in any scenario. We can take a look at the numbers on a slightly lower defense here. This is about of a hard difficulty. The boss level is 280. They start around about 2 to 2,500 to 3,000 defense. They're all a bit different, but they're in that range. Again, we're going to put on a decreased defense. We're going to put a fully stacked Cruelty. So we're going to look at the difference here. Now, less defense means Crushing Rend is less impactful. So where are we starting? Well, the Phantom Touch has gone up in damage, as you'd expect. The defense is lower. The Crushing Rend has gone down in damage because there's less defense we can ignore, so the value of that blessing decreases. Hero Soul is linear. It's a straight multiplication. It's the same as what it was above. So above, we can see that actually Crushing Rend was nearly matching Hero Soul. Now, Hero Soul is sort of striding away from that Crushing Rend, and Phantom Touch is also keeping ahead. It's growing. So when we're looking at sort of the easier difficulties, then Phantom Touch and Hero Soul becomes stronger. So the TLDR here of this little math exercise, if your champion is HP based, AoE based, or defense based, 100% Hero Soul. If your champion is attack based and is more single target focused, you can choose which level of ascendancy you've got. Keep in mind that Hero Soul is going to work on all tiers of Awakening. You'll get more as you climb, but it will work on all tiers. Whereas you've got a chance for more burst on the Phantom Touch. The Phantom Touch could be quite useful if you need to really hit a single target really hard, like a decapitated head or a head that is consumed. The choice is yours. I would argue that Crushing Rend is not really worth in any scenario unless you're really 6-star and you really want it. But generally, I think the other two blessings are stronger. So here's an example of a team, now that we've gone through all that information, that is basically following that methodology. We've got an AoE A1 Nia here who has got Cruelty. Obviously, the higher Awakening would be better. We've got an Aura with a Neri. We're going to get more speed. We only need the Epic Aura. We've got Hero Soul on our Royal Guard for an AoE max nuke. He's also got that 4-hitter on the A1, so all of his abilities are going to benefit from that one blessing. We have a single target Brimstone on Ninja, so we can try and make sure we put the Brimstone on the Suffering Head. And then I'm left with sort of an option with Cantra, and I've just gone for Soul Reap because it is a high Awakening. I've been testing it on her, and I haven't really found a better option for her just yet. She's not built to do damage, so Hero Soul would not benefit from it. So we're just going to hope that we can get some sort of excess damage here. That is a good model for what you should do to make sure you maximize the blessings value in your Hydra team. So there you go, guys. A bit longer than I was planning to do initially, but I hope that was of interest to you. I hope it answers some of the questions that you may have had in terms of like picking your blessings. Some of the information in blessings is quite behind the scenes. You wouldn't know about it until you actually use it or until you have checked the code like I have. So there are things that never get told to you that you actually need to know because they are relevant to the way that you would pick your blessings. If you did enjoy watching this video, please consider doing all the YouTubey things here. Give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. Any video that we do going out will come straight into your feed, and we are doing videos sort of every day. But until then, guys, I'll catch you in the next video.